Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. As co-chair of this event, I'd like to thank you all for coming out. I've found this to be a bigger and better experience than even last year, which was a marvelous conference. I tried to get out to most of the workshops that went on. Hard when it's all concurrent sessions, isn't it? And we try to distribute everybody's interests, but it's nearly impossible. So as part of the Energy Matters Summit, what we try to do at the end is to bring the chairs of the individual sessions up on stage as part of a panel discussion and give them 5 to 7 minutes to share with you the insights, the key nuggets and findings that they found in their 4 workshops that they can give to you, so that, yes, those sessions that you couldn't make it to because you were talking to somebody in the exhibit hall or because you were in another session, you can still learn from that. If we don't use all of the time, and I hope we don't, I'd like to open it up to the floor as well and give you the opportunity to question some of those chairs on some of those nuggets. We have 2 microphones, as you know, here. So once we're done with the talks from each of the session chairs, please feel free to go to a mic and ask a question. I'd like to now call up the session chairs. Carol Champion, Director of Industrial Engagement with and Sector Lead for Energy, Environment, and the Ontario Centres of Excellence. Carol, you can join me here. Belinda Ray, Manager, Business Development, Sector Manager, Energy and Environment, Ontario Centres of Excellence. If you could join Carol. John Purkis, Sustainability Expert with the Natural Step. John. Ian Jarvis, President, Enerlife Consulting. Ian. There we are. Tanya Delmato, Founder of Sustainability Canada. Thank you, Tanya. Jan Buick, Chairman, Wade Canada, President, CEO of European Power Systems. Jan, join us up there. So if you wouldn't mind, my chairs, very pleased that you're here right to the end of the conference helping us out. I'm going to call on Carol and we'll go down the line individually, 5 to 7 minutes to share with the audience. If you could use the podium over there. Carol?
Well, good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you about 2 of the workshops that were held within Track 1, which is the Clean Technologies track. The first one was entitled Energy Storage, the Holy Grail, and that was a question mark. So we had 2 young Ontario companies speaking to this. The first one was Temporal Power, which is a flywheel company, and the second is Hydrostore. And Hydrostore is looking at compressed underwater technology, compressed air underwater technology. So Curtis van Wallenheim from Hydrostore gave us a very good overview of storage and why it's needed. And of course, the issue is that in recent years, with the advent of the Green Energy and Green Economy Act and the FIT program, we've had a lot more renewables connected to the grid. And all of the associated problems with intermittency, particularly with solar and wind. And the grid just wasn't designed for this type of distributed generation. And the grid wasn't designed either to incorporate measures to mitigate that intermittency, like storage. So storage is not mandatory, but it plays a part in the best models for a low-cost, high-efficiency electricity delivery system. We talked about all kinds of storage, going from long-term, which is possible now through initiatives like power to gas, which is something which is being promoted by Enbridge, where surplus electricity is taken, you put it through a hydrolyzer, you store the hydrogen in the natural gas system, and spike the natural gas system with about up to 5% hydrogen when and where needed. Of course, the biggest source of long-term storage is pumped hydro. And pumped hydro accounts for about 99% of the worldwide storage right now, and that's because it's large scale and it's also low cost. So then we started to talk about newer technology like battery technology, lithium-ion batteries, sodium-sulfur batteries, flow batteries, and how these can be incorporated into the grid. And we've got several demonstration projects which are happening right now in Ontario. We also talked about very short-term types of storage, like, for example, flywheels, which Temporal Power has developed flywheels, and they provide very fast demand response, and this demand response can be from seconds to minutes. There's also software out there too, which can help with this, like Enbala's software. We then got a bit of an overview of HydroStore's technology, and this is underwater compressed energy storage, where you need a deep resource like a lake or offshore. HydroStore is actually going to have a demonstration project in Lake Ontario later this year. And they're also operating in the Caribbean. So the ideal spot for this type of storage is in a place that's remote and where energy costs are very high, where you're using diesel technology for energy generation. So that's the sweet spot for this. Temporal Power is a flywheel technology. Right now they are working in the Sarnia-Lambton area with IESO, and they can provide energy storage, and 1 megawatt of flywheel can replace about 4 to 5 times megawatt of traditional energy generation. And this is basically, it's all about frequency regulation. So this technology is high performance, and this is where we need a bit of a paradigm change in thinking. It's high performance, but it's low cost, which is not always necessarily intuitive. So what's needed in Ontario, and this is the kind of the call to action from this session, is a change in thinking, that high performance can be lower cost. And there's a need also to work with the regulators, with the Ministry of Energy on a regular basis to incorporate and make sure that changes in technology are accompanied by changes in the regulatory system so that the whole system can be made more efficient. So that kind of wraps up most of the points from the first session. The second session I was involved in was all about renewing the power grid. And we had 3 tremendous speakers here from Toronto Hydro, and from an individual who's a real serial entrepreneur and who represented 2 companies, Energent and Solar Extent. So Hydro One, of course, is the transmitter for the province, but it's also a local distribution company, and as a local distribution company, it's dealing with very long distribution lines, some of which are up to 80 kilometers in length. Toronto Hydro's has some more issues being associated with a very kind of small urban community, very densely populated. They are dealing with aging infrastructure. And the 2 issues here, the 2 major issues, dealing with aging infrastructure, so it's not a greenfield situation, and the whole transformation that's taking place of the electricity infrastructure, which has started to happen in the last few years, changing to what we all know as smart grid. So the issues, and these were brought forward by David Curtis, who's the Director of Asset Strategy for Hydro One, are by replacing central generation, particularly the coal plants, you're looking at bringing in renewable generation, and the impact on the transmission system is that you're going to need grid upgrades. You have issues with reactive power, you have issues with operation and dispatch, and you have issues which are caused by power quality. On the distribution system, which is not designed for multi-generation, you have issues with two-way power flow, you have voltage fluctuations, and again, you have power quality issues. There are problems with existing grid electronics, both in terms of advances are happening very quickly, and old power electronics devices have issues which are causing power quality constraints, and there are also controls and security issues which need to be dealt with as well. And power quality is another issue with smart home appliances. So what you really need to do in looking at smart grid is to take what you've got, the existing power technologies, and incorporate advanced analytics, smart devices, and automation. So it's the marriage of the traditional power grid with communications technology. And this is all to make it reliable, flexible, secure, and efficient. And as part of that smart grid, you've got to think about building technology, renewables, electric vehicles, smart end use, and storage. And Hydro One has traditionally taken a look at fax devices, which are flexible AC devices, such as STATCOMs or static VAR compensators. These things are all very, very costly to put on the system, but they're tried and they're true. And this is something I will come back to in a minute when we start to talk about some of the newer technologies which were put forward at the end of that session. Toronto, Richard Ford spoke very, very eloquently about the issues facing Toronto, where you have 2.8 million people in a very small location. They are distributing 19% of the power in Ontario, and they have a client base of about 940,000. And they're faced with the aging asset problem big time. Since 2006, they've invested $1.7 billion in the power grid, and as we speak, they've now got 20% of their assets which are beyond lifetime expectancy. And it's going to take $3.4 billion to replace those assets or refurbish them. By 2021, another 19% is going to be beyond their useful lifetime expectancy, and that's going to take another $2.3 billion to upgrade. So you can see that the issues here, both in terms of investment and incorporation of these new assets into the grid, are tremendous. After 2021, 53% will be just prior to the end of life, and that's going to cost another $6.3 billion. So financing of this is a big issue as well. In Toronto, you've got more skyscrapers and high-rises under construction than anywhere else in North America. Toronto has 189 under construction, and that's more than Mexico City and New York City combined, more than Chicago, which has 24, more than Houston, which has 22. The demand for electricity has increased by 58% since 2009. How can you keep pace with that? It's a real issue. A lot of the assets are 50 to 70 years old, and a lot of them are underground. So out of sight, out of mind is another issue that they have. However, they're making a lot of investments, and they've made a lot of new investments in new technology, which include storage technologies. So they've taken, Richard made the point that new technologies have to be proven, they have to be tested, and there has to be a good business case before you can think about making the purchase and then putting them into the grid. So Toronto Hydro's done a lot of good work in incorporating, for example, power line monitors, transformer monitors, and incorporating energy storage.
30 seconds, Carol.
So they have to think about how technology improves customer service. That's their bottom line. In terms of new technologies coming online, there are new technologies in terms of being able to increase transmission capacity, and this has been developed by Western University, and it's in fact technology which can increase the capacity of the transmission and the distribution system by putting a controller on existing inverters for a solar farm. So a solar farm, in fact, can be used to store energy at night for a nearby wind farm, and it can also be used to solve other critical power system issues like voltage issues and frequency regulation and line losses on the grid. Jerry Sullivan, who is associated with Energent, which many of you may have heard of, as well as SolarExtent, is working with this company, and their business is basically energy informatics and optimization. And this is technology which is realizing tremendous savings for customers who've implemented it. Jerry showed a chart of all of the restaurants, for example, at Whistler Blackcomb, where they're monitoring the restaurants and how they've managed to affect change in behavior of the restaurant managers by them able to see a screen which demonstrates when their peak usage occurs. So Energent is doing a lot of good work and incorporating some good research that's being done at University of Waterloo. And I guess the only question that I have is I would like to go out and I'd like to buy an Energent system for my own home. And I'd just like to know when I can go out and do that. So there's an issue here of how we can increase commercialization of all of this new technology, how we can demonstrate it, and how we can spread the word, because we're working in a very fragmented system in Ontario. So how can we do this? And it's by conferences such as this, and I thank the organizers of this conference to be given this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Belinda?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm reporting back on two sessions, and as Carol did on the Clean Energy Technologies track. The first workshop focused on new energy generation technologies and the platforms needed to support them. We had 4 companies present at this session: Morgan Solar, Resco Energy, Geo Energy Solutions, and Cisco Systems. From the point of view of Morgan Solar, we had a really good overview of what's happening in the area of solar photovoltaic technology development and the advancements that have happened over the years, and also the growth that's been seen in solar PV installations. As well, from a technology standpoint, advancements in technologies related to fuel cells, trackers and inverters that go along with solar PV systems was given a very solid overview from that perspective. In terms of a call to action that came out of this presentation, it was really the development or the need to develop a business model for solar PVs that is a global one and not just Ontario focused. So the opportunities for the technology and implementation and from a business point of view is really a global marketplace and a growing global marketplace beyond Ontario. So that was a very key nugget that came out of that session or that presentation. Resco Energy, residential energy installers, the focus of that presentation was really the emphasis on the shift from traditional energy generation consumption model of power with buildings as passive loads to buildings as sources or conservation centers or micro generators. The challenge that was identified was how to add and integrate storage, generation, control, and networks in a building context, whether it was commercial or residential. And looking out to the future, the opportunity for change is certainly there in terms of considering the perspectives of building managers, building owners in the face of rising electricity prices. So it's really the engagement and dialogue to better engage with the owners and managers to really help them better manage their energy systems. From the geothermal energy perspective, we had a solid overview of how the earth can be used as a heat source and sink as well, supplying both heating and cooling. The key challenge for the geothermal industry is really drilling, and that's drilling on commercial construction sites beside or underneath existing buildings in urban areas. So the big picture that was presented was really the need for better appreciation of district energy systems coupled with intelligent control technology, as well as public utility ownership of borehole loops that eliminate the first large drilling cost barriers. We had a presentation from Cisco Systems, who are working on a power over Ethernet system of up to 60 watts of power directly through an Internet Ethernet architecture. And the call to action that was identified was the fact that ICT must increase its energy efficiency, and that ICT networks can be an enabler of broader system increases in energy efficiency and help to catalyze integration of renewables and other energy technologies. And from that perspective, also help to drive fundamentally new home and commercial energy networks. So one of the key comments that came out at the end of the presentation after the question session period was the fact that obsolescence tomorrow should not be an excuse for inaction today, and that really resonated with the audience in terms of there are new technologies that are coming on stream all the time. However, we should allow for the existing technologies that have been developed to start generating revenue as we start upgrading the platform for the future. The second workshop focused on electric vehicles. Drag Race to a Sustainable Future was the title of that session. And we had presentations from Electric Mobility Canada, Plug and Drive Ontario, and the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. And the session explored how electric vehicles are transforming our energy system. And we had a global high-level view of the EV market, perspectives on the awareness and adoption of electric cars by consumers, as well as the impact of electric vehicles on the grid. So Chris Hill from EMC, Electric Mobility Canada, that's a not-for-profit industry association that focuses on advancing the use of electric-powered transportation, provided a strong overview of where the greatest concentration is in terms of the EV market across the country. And in fact, the largest number of charging stations are found in Ontario and Quebec. And one of the emerging trends is the fact that manufacturers are looking to increase fuel economy around electric vehicles. There are currently 5 electric vehicle models in the marketplace, and what's driving most manufacturers to EVs is the price of gasoline. And so car buying decisions is primarily based on fuel economy, and that's actually going to help grow the electric vehicle market. As well, we talked about the numerous benefits of electric cars, HOV lanes, parking, the opportunity, the ability to fuel at home. And one of the notable comments was the fact that for fleet operators, plug-in vehicles come with stable fueling costs, so a very important economic consideration for fleet management. And we've seen that there's been an expansion of electric vehicles to beyond cars to trolley buses and in Germany, heavy-duty vehicles. So one of the issues that was raised in that respect was the impact of EVs on the grid. So there was a good discussion around the importance of EV charging and looking at connections at the end of the grid and how the existing distribution systems will handle new EVs. Kara Clareman, who's the president and CEO of Plug and Drive, presented the challenges and opportunities around the implementation or the adoption of electric vehicles. We know that the grid is cleaner nowadays in terms of the supply mix and that there's a surplus of electricity at night. So the opportunity really is to turn a money loser for Ontario into a money winner. And there's been tremendous improvement in terms of emissions reductions through the adoption of electric vehicles, and that can continue. Cost savings, it costs anywhere from $20 to $30 a month to charge electric vehicles versus hundreds and hundreds of dollars for regular cars using gasoline. So while we know that electricity prices will go up, they will not go up as compared to the cost of gas, which is increasing. In terms of the benefits of electric vehicle purchase, there are rebate programs that are available. Sustainability is a key factor in the consideration of electric vehicles in terms of job creation and really helping with the surplus baseload. As well, from an infrastructure standpoint, there's an opportunity to set up more charging stations, and in fact, local utilities are interested in learning more about and engaging with companies and actually consumers themselves who want to purchase electric vehicles and set up charging stations right at home. So really, the dialogue has to move forward in that regard. So the whole notion of public infrastructure is quite an important one, as well as the changing of people's mindsets in terms of awareness and education opportunities, and that's really what Plug and Drive focuses on. The good news is that there are over 150 charging stations in Ontario and more than 400 across Canada, so there are more charging stations coming online, so different options are going to be available for different people to help increase that adoption rate. And we also, from a research and development and technology development standpoint, Dr. Vijay Sood from the University of Ontario Institute of Technology presented on the impact of electric vehicles on the utility distribution systems. And the focus was to look at opportunities to really reduce peak loads and find efficiencies for the grid and for the environment at the same time. Right now, today, the grid is more than capable of handling electric vehicles. There's a project underway in Durham Region with several partners whose goal is to study what will happen when there are, say, 100,000 electric vehicles on the grid. And we know that right now the annual fuel cost is 1/3 for electric vehicles versus gas. And part of the study will look at that over the long term, as well as the monitoring and data collection, which is really important to understand the full impact of electric vehicles. And next steps with regards to research is looking at what would happen if you had a whole street of houses with charging stations along the road. And from a scientific standpoint, that research is looking at things like harmonics and different types of chargers that would have different effects on the grid. And I guess to conclude from that research perspective is that it's important to continue those projects and look at research as an important element of supporting opportunities for new technology development and the adoption of electric vehicles and related technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. John Purkis.
All right. I have 4 sessions that I'm going to be covering, which are Track 2, Energy, Environment, and Sustainability Planning. I'm going to try and do them in 3 minutes, so keep you to that just so we can have a bit more time for discussion. There's lots of good information in the book, and there'll also be information shared after the conference as well. So you'll have access to more detailed information on each of the presentations. So the first session I looked at was called, it really looked at sustainability and energy planning, and in particular looked at how bold visions can really drive innovation. So there's a lot of plans, there's a lot of targets and goals. The thing that we explored was, do bold visions actually drive innovation and lead to more creativity? And the answer is yes. So that was the first session. I think the important thing in there is that energy itself, when we talk about energy, if we ask people what is energy, well, energy is motion. Anything that moves uses energy in one form or another. So a lot of these sustainability and community energy plans go well beyond our traditional energy use, which is electricity and various other types of energy sources, gases, biogases, etc. So taking that holistic approach and using bold visions can really help drive innovation and creativity. The second session that I had hosted, which was lots of fun, was about best practices in community energy planning. So we looked at a number of different community energy planning initiatives. We had some excellent research from two of our presenters, and their research reports are available. Again, links will be provided afterwards. I think one of the things that came out of this is that there isn't an answer in terms of the best practices. BC, we had a gentleman from BC, Dale Littlejohn, with us. They have a very strong regulatory framework in BC. It's different than Ontario, but that type of legislation, as we all know, does drive innovation and creativity as well. And there's lots of good best practices throughout the province of Ontario here that other communities can learn from. One of the things that I find interesting in this area is that there are so many new activities and practices across the country and Canada, it's hard to keep track of them. So if anyone is looking for a part-time job keeping track of all of the cool projects, and if there's a sponsor in the room who wants to sponsor that, let me know and I'll be a matchmaker there. But there literally are new projects coming on board all the time across the country, and it's hard to keep track of them. And that panel session provided good insights into a number of the new approaches, tools, and techniques on community energy planning. Third session I had was around looking at how the traditional energy manager job description is changing. So this session really looked at the role of energy and how it's in everyone's job description. And in particular, we had panel speakers talk about the health side. So we had a great keynote yesterday. One of my panel presenters, Dr. Alan Abelson, spoke more about some of the local health issues from Toronto. He's a family physician, family doctor, who also has a passion for sustainability and environmental issues. So he talked a lot about current stats and trends and indicators and programs from the Toronto area. I see someone timing me here, so I gotta hurry up. The other thing that's neat about the job description thing is that I like to say it's the job description is from everyone from my 7-year-old son to finance managers, etc. So my 7-year-old at home, he's our energy manager at home. If my wife leaves the lights on, which she often does, and he turns the light off, he gets 10 cents. So in the last couple of years, he's learned to think more from a systems perspective, and he's also been running around the house making money so he can buy more Lego. Anyone who has a 7-year-old will, I'm sure, appreciate that. Last session was on tools and resources. There is a tremendous amount of new tools and resources that are coming online and are being developed. And in this panel, we learned about a few of them. Some new ones from the Canadian Urban Institute in Toronto here, some neat ones that are being developed out in Calgary. And it's the same comment as I had before about best practices. Lots of new stuff that's being created, and in particular in areas where there's been a lot of innovation and creativity. So City of Calgary, we heard some great examples of different community energy mapping systems there. And I'll leave it at that. One final thing, I just wanted to put out a challenge, and I've still got a couple of seconds, so I'll do that. One of the things I'd like to suggest for the future conferences is how can we make better use of the brain power that's in the room here, and to come up and try and address some specific challenges that were mentioned by Nick, for example, in the last keynote presentation. I think there's an excellent opportunity to engage this audience in a deeper way and to help overcome and identify specific solutions to the problems that we've talked about and that we're facing. Thank you.
Ian Jarvis.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and congratulations on the attention after lunch on the second day. This is a challenge. So Bernie asked me to share just some reflections on 2 days and 4 workshops examining the whole area of energy efficiency. And there are 4 themes that I thought I would share with you as kind of going away gifts before we go back to our regular lives. The first is in this, just how fast this energy efficiency agenda is unfolding, how fast this current iteration of energy conservation is moving forward, and just how much the conversation has changed just since last year. Listening to senior managers from Oxford Properties and Infrastructure Ontario, from the City of Oshawa and the City of Toronto, from York Catholic School Board and Simcoe County School Board, senior managers who know their metrics. They're talking the talk. They know where they're at. They know what their baseline is. They've got targets. They've got standards. Just how much more sophisticated the conversation is becoming. So the conversation has moved on. I was struck by just how the data and the use of data is growing so dramatically in this space, that the metrics of performance in so many different building types are becoming clear. We know what high-performing buildings look like, we know what low-performing buildings look like. We're starting to make the connection between the two, and we set the stage for what REALPAC put together in 2009 with its 20 by 15 target for commercial buildings, set the stage for the announcement here by Toronto Region Conservation of the Town Hall Challenge. So how the data is moving forward. I think the third theme I was struck by was how public policy is just kind of falling into place. In different sessions, we had the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we had the Ontario Ministry of Energy, and we had the Federal Office of Energy Efficiency talking about what they're up to and how well aligned that stuff is. We've got Energy Star Canada being launched in July here, which is going to add further to the richness and the volume of the data. We got the Green Energy Act, where the reporting is coming into place now. How cool is that? Who would have imagined that a decade ago? And we got FCM's continuing current relevant programs supporting municipalities, supporting communities, how this all is kind of coming together in a great policy framework. And the final thought I'll leave with you, because I think it's one for everybody here, is just where leadership fits into this. So all of this is happening in the background, policy's getting straightened away, the data is there, but listening to our 6 primary players here, Oxford Properties, Infrastructure Ontario, City of Oshawa, the City of Toronto, York Catholic School Board, Simcoe County School Board, going way beyond what is expected of them now, setting standards, setting metrics, kind of blazing the trail. So I got to say, I'm excited about Energy Matters 2014. And I hope many of you will be back, and I hope many of you who are responsible for buildings will be coming back with stories of leadership. We'll be coming back with not following, but with carving new space that can find its place on these panels, can share your stories, because it's individual leadership that is going to drive this agenda forward in the way it needs to. Struck finally by the data. 2006, I mentioned this in all of our sessions, the Green Building Council felt that we should be cutting energy use in buildings by half. Not by 5%, not by 10%, cutting buildings, energy use in buildings by half. Everything that has happened in benchmarking and progress and leading organizations since then reinforces the fact that that is quite attainable. So what seemed hopelessly ambitious less than a decade ago now seems to be business as usual and what we should be striving for. So look forward to Energy Matters 2014, and we look forward to hearing your tales of leadership then. Thank you.
Tanya?
Okay. All right, I had the session on engagement, so this was a lot of fun to put together, and all the speakers lived up to the promise of being engaging. One of our speakers actually summarized it right off the top quite nicely in our initial session, and I'll read verbatim the 2 key messages here, because these actually weave their way throughout the entire stream of the engagement piece. You don't have to care about energy efficiency to be engaged. And it is the job of the electricity sector to understand customers and how to make energy efficiency relevant. So on that last point, I would take that a little bit more broader statement and say it's the job of all of us as change makers to understand whether it's our customers, our employees, our community. We need to really dig deep and find out what makes those human entities tick, and then actually speak to them. So it was that really carried throughout the 4 workshops. The first workshop dealt with the path of the green consumer. So we had a very interesting initial ground presentation on electric personalities, which I'd encourage you all to check out on the Power Authority's website. Really gets at the root of the various personality types that are out there and what makes them tick. So if you are designing behavior change programs, really key piece to focus in on that. And then we took that notion and we built on it in terms of what sort of dynamics happen in the retail space between consumers and salespeople, and just that whole interaction of information exchange and decision making, and understanding what, there's a lot of potential there to relay behavior change information. And then further to that, looking at actual decision making tools on home renovations. The second workshop, I was marketing this in the hallway quite heavily because it's the only one that had fun in the title, and as a result I was able to attract a fair number of participants. And we looked at 3 different types of engagement tools for folks, one being the social media space, right? The second being the creation of videos as a way to engage people, and then the third actually taking the more traditional route of playing games and using that as a way to sort of take all lighten the mood, if you will, and create that space for people to learn. And it was quite a fascinating session there. So, and it did live up to its reputation of fun. The second day, the third workshop was specifically on employee engagement, and we basically had 4 leaders there who are in the trenches trying to engage employees on an everyday basis. And the takeaway from that is it's very much a two-way street in terms of trying to create a successful employee engagement program. You really have to build an ecosystem, and you have to have champions out there and build upon that in terms of engagement. And then the fourth and final session was on community engagement. So really taking all these learnings and how do you engage on a community level. And the key messages there were looking at partnerships and collaboration and bringing different groups together, understanding where they're coming from, and going towards collective goals. So it was a real pleasure to be the moderator for this stream. I learned a lot, and all the presenters were just fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. John Dewitt.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Bernie, for inviting me to participate in this fantastic event and being able to chair the 4 workshops that I was involved in. In my stream, we were looking at enabling distributed generation, and it was quickly pointed out that it's really distributed energy. It's not always about generation. So the 4 workshops that we were working on was really taking a look at what's happening globally. So we had a speaker from Germany talk about what they see on a global perspective, and then look at what the Canadian perspective was. We had a session that dealt with experience with on-site generation. We then had a session that was looking at district energy. Again, looking at what's the global status and situation with district energy, and what are we seeing in Canada. And that then was concluded with the last workshop dealing with the policy discussion around what are the policies, the regulations, what does it take to make some of the visions that the speakers had talked about to make that happen. So what are the regulatory opportunities, and also what are the barriers that are being encountered. So throughout these workshops, I've made some notes, and I want to share with you some of the highlights as what I heard, not necessarily in the same order. What became clear is that the speakers generally saw that there's the expectation of a growing presence of renewables and decentralized energy. There's a real expectation that there's a continued transition to more renewables, and it was pointed out several times how successful jurisdictions such as Germany and Denmark are in their transition to renewables, and how they set incredible targets and manage to achieve those incredible targets while seemingly have no negative impact on the performance of their economies. Started to see some comments about how the growing presence of renewables is also resulting in a change in energy infrastructure that due to the intermittent nature of renewables, there is more need for flexible energy systems, and that's where the connection between high efficiency CHP that provides very efficient, low emission, flexible generation is a very good match to the intermittent nature of renewables. There was a comment made in a workshop, Canada needs a revolution in thinking, building, sourcing, and paying for energy to become more sustainable. That's one that I had to drive down because I'm going to use it in a future presentation somewhere. We had one customer one presenter who invested in cogeneration somewhere in the late 90s, which is when electricity prices were reasonably high, natural gas prices were lower, and they did right through the past 15 years with the changes in market conditions, with increasing gas prices, and they explained to us how the investment in on-site cogeneration, the first 6 or 7 years, resulted in annual savings as expected. Then by 2007, 2008, natural gas prices had reached the level where it became uneconomic to run. So they had 1 or 2 years where they were either not running or running very limited hours, followed by 2009, 2010, the ability to participate in a demand response program, which suddenly gave them an opportunity to again utilize their assets to generate income or to save on their energy costs. So they invested 13, 14 years ago in on-site cogeneration. They have gone through the motions of a good market, a difficult market, and some other changes. Despite all these challenges along the way, they look at their investment and say it has been a fantastic investment, has resulted in significant cost savings, has resulted in improved power reliability, improved power quality, and had they do it all over again, they would absolutely do this again. So what we start to see is that there's a smarter use of these energy assets. The on-site cogeneration system is a good example of what started as a 24/7 operation started to be used different. We had presented a talk about demand response programs where it's not necessarily cogeneration projects, but generators that are sitting idle to be used for standby power can be utilized for demand response when there is need for power on the grid or for organizations to reduce their demand, to drop their load, and they can do that by running their generators. So what we start seeing is a smarter use of energy assets. We are seeing a more and more complicated energy market, and we start to see that these energy assets, whether it's standby generators, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, whether it's cogeneration, all are starting to work together to address the supply and the demand dynamics. And we see a real transition happening that these different technologies start to work smarter, and that these generating assets may be used in a different way than what they initially were intended for. We then got into a district energy discussion, and it was really pointed out there that Ontario seems to have focused on electricity as the main energy focus, where really it's electricity and thermal energy combined that you need to look at. And it was really highlighted that district energy provides the missing grid, the district energy grid, the thermal grid that ties it all together, which allows you to utilize all these different sources of thermal energy, whether it's waste heat from industry, whether it's geothermal, whether it's solar, whether it's heat recovered from cogeneration. You can utilize that thermal energy network to take all that heat energy from all those different sources and then distribute it to all the buildings in a town. It's in recent years demonstrated how important and how reliable these district energy systems are. Only have to look at some of the natural disasters that have been experienced in recent years, whether it's Hurricane Sandy, where entire areas were without power for weeks. Yet district energy systems in those areas, they survived. They were the bright lights where the power was still on, heat was still being distributed, and they were able to ride through these disasters. And that's been pointed out as some of the key benefits of district energy. It was identified as an urban platform to advanced distributed energy, and not only to improve energy efficiency, but also to strengthen the energy reliability in a city. And it was actually pointed out in the discussion after that, and I do want to share it with you, is that a city like Toronto, with their really sensitive power infrastructure, is only one power outage away from a significant disaster. And district energy can provide so much more and provide the energy security and infrastructure to not only become more efficient, but also more reliable and more sustainable. 30 seconds, John? 30 seconds, all right, we can do that. Also it's highlighted that there has been no opposition to on-site generation, to district energy. There is no people with banners in the street protesting against a cogeneration system going into a hospital or into a district energy system. Highlight that the potential is there, the opportunity is there. We need regulatory support, the right political decisions to make these visions happen. So let's work together to make this happen. Thank you very much.
They've threatened me with a power outage in the building if I go overtime, and I'm already there, so I'm living on borrowed time. If you have a burning question, comment, reasonable outburst, make your way to the mic. Anyone? It's my life on the line here. Harriet? It's me, not them. No? I'd like to comment that, one of the themes that I hear in all of this is about engagement and communication. Opportunities like the Energy Matters Summit presents for us to exchange our knowledge, our experience, to communicate on what we've seen or heard elsewhere. How do we move technology into society if it's not through that engagement of each other, engagement of those corporations, engagement of agencies? Looking at John Perkins, community energy planning is all about, sustainability is all about that engagement, getting people actively involved. Ian and what he's found with his building works. The data's there, it's been there forever. It's about looking at that data, engaging with that data, engaging with your peers to understand what they're implementing, what best practices they're using. And it's all about engagement, isn't it? Really. And I was intrigued, and I sat in on one of Jan's talks, and the chap from Germany mentioned that leap they're having now where, my wife and my kids' pictures are all stored in California on a server somewhere, this virtualization of a power plant. and our ability to use technology that would tap into resources that are already existing, a backup power or a CHP somewhere, to bring that together as one unit, changes how society is going to build and how we're going to operate in the future. But it's this engagement and our ability to share that knowledge that's huge. So, two things. One, challenge you. Take what you've learned here in these 2 days, short period of time, connect with the people that you've met here, and apply what you've learned. We have to do the practical application of what we've learned in these sessions if we're going to get somewhere. And I offer you the opportunity. Do it. Come back to us next year and let's share it. Tell us your story. Tell us your successes. Tell us your failures. The second thing, and Steve, I'll get off of here, join me in a big round of applause for our session chairs. They go through a lot of work to bring you the speakers that we have at this conference. Thank you very much.